Alright guys, today I want to talk to you about one of my favorite techniques for catching fish during the spawn, and that's throwing a wacky rig. Now, you know, we all have heard of a wacky rig, the concept of rigging a worm in the middle of the worm and casting out there, letting it sink and fishing it. However, I'm going to show you a few different methods of fishing a wacky rig that's going to relate to you and your area. So basically, traveling all over the country, I figured out a couple of things. A, they eat a wacky worm everywhere you go. B, they kind of eat it differently everywhere you go. And C, you got to be prepared for any situation that you encounter. So hopefully this video will help you know exactly what type of wacky rig that you need to throw in your area and how to fish it effectively. But before we get started, if you don't mind, hit that subscribe button in the bottom right corner of your screen, my left, if you don't mind. And once again, thank you so much for everybody that subscribed. You know, the deal is right now is we're dealing with the coronavirus. It's insane. Things are happening. You know, we're all kind of stuck indoors. So, and I hope some of you are stuck indoors. You know, the deal is this is an extremely serious situation. So please listen to the leaders of this country. We elected them for a reason and put them in a position that they have to make that decision, that hard decision that we a lot of times can't make. And so just be careful. I mean, first and foremost, wash your hands. Like, just let's practice like normal, like sanitary things like washing your hands. But anyways, let's dive right on into this wacky rig video. You know, the cool thing about wacky rigging is, like I said, you can fish it anywhere. And not to confuse this with Neko rigging. Neko rigging is the art of rigging the worm vertical with the hook. And I'll show you examples of this as we go through this video. But first and foremost, the wacky rig that I grew up fishing was the concept of taking a straight shank type worm hook, just like this one right here, okay? And taking a straight tail worm, whether it's a trick worm. In this case, this is called the 6.5 inch finesse worm by Strike King. But it's literally taking this hook and putting it in the middle of the worm. So that's a basic wacky rigging right there, okay? This is what we did on Sam Rayburn forever. We've caught millions of bass doing this. But there's two trains of thought whenever you're looking at basic wacky rigging like this. And to give an example, David Dudley, and I don't know if you know David Dudley, but David Dudley has made a career of throwing a wacky worm, and he's probably one of the very best out there doing it. So there's two trains of thought whenever you're thinking about a wacky worm. You can either A, hook it in the middle just like this, or B, hook it at the egg sac, okay? So you can do it either or. So you can rig it where one side's longer than the other or straight in the middle. I actually kind of mix it up depending on how I weight the plastic. Yes, I weight my wacky worm. There's a lot of guys that don't. But in this case, I'm not throwing a floating worm. I'm not throwing a methylate worm and twitching it around. I don't want it to float too high. The only case that I'd want a wacky worm to float that high is if I'm fishing like insanely shallow water. And I'm talking 6 inches to less than a foot of water. But in this case, I reach for a nail weight. This is just your standard lead nail weight. It's nothing special. The cool thing about lead is you can break them and make them any size you want to. You know, the reason people call it a nail weight, in case you don't know, a nail weight actually comes from people using nails as weights. Because before these weights came out, we were actually using nails, actual like finishing nails and things like that. And that's how we were weighting these wacky worms. So basically, what I always do, and this is just, I always bite off a little of the tip. You want to flatten that end out pretty good. And then you just decide which size weight. I typically break mine in half because I don't want that much weight on it. And I take the sharp end and I put it in the end of the worm, like so, okay? It's pretty simple, just like that. Yeah, I know you can't see it, but the weight is here on the end of the worm. The only other little trick I do is I get those little worm rattles, the little small ones, tiny ones. I think they're like 12 millimeter or something. And I'll actually insert those in the tail. This is strictly a spawn situation that I do that. But that little bit of extra sound, I don't know if it helps. Mentally, it helps me. So that's the original wacky worm, okay? This is something that, like I said, I've done for years. It's extremely effective on Sam Rayburn, Toledo Bend, these big fish lakes, Guntersville. Look at the Last Bass Pro Tour event that they had at Lake Fork. A couple of the guys were catching them on a wacky worm, especially the later spawn, especially at like Lake Athens and things like that. So anytime you hit that mid to late spawn where the fish kind of start getting finicky, they get hard to catch, that's when I turn to the wacky worm. Color situations for the original Wacky Worm, I keep it fairly basic. I don't have every color that I like to throw up here. Green pumpkin, I mean, you can't go wrong with green pumpkin. I actually like green pumpkin whenever I'm fishing in lake, like a Hartwell, a rock lake. Okay, and that can give you an example. Any rock lake, I like going with a green pumpkin. I'll throw black and blue. June bug if it's cloudy. June bug, straight tail worm when it's cloudy is just killer. I don't care what the watercolor is, okay? Forget the watercolor. Think only in the skies. So keep your eyes in the sky. So if it's sunny, you want a more of a transparent bait like a watermelon or a green pumpkin. The cloudier it gets, go with like a June bug, black and blue. Do not be scared to throw a darker color when it gets cloudy, even in clear water. I think it really makes a big difference. So there's that. And as far as what rod I throw it on, I actually throw it on a spinning rod. I just always have. I throw most of my lighter Wacky rigs on a spinning rod. This happens to be a Mach II. This is not the combo series. This is actually like the Mach II rod with a Mach II reel. This is a 6.9 medium fast action. I just like a 6.9. I've grown up fishing a 6.9. Actually, I used to fish a 6.10, but they don't make a 6.10 anymore, so I make a 6.9. But I use 10 to 20 pound Strike King braid right here. I use yellow. This just happens to be green, but I use yellow pretty much exclusively. And the reason why is because I can see it. So when you're using a fluorocarbon leader, it doesn't really matter what color your braid is because they're not going to see it anyway. It's more for your visual. So when I'm casting that Wacky Worm out there and I'm sitting there shaking it or letting it fall, a lot of times you're never going to feel the bite. They're just going to swim off with it. And that was one of the big keys to my win at Cherokee was watching my line. And so what I would do is I'd flip that Wacky Worm out there. I'd watch it fall, and my line would twitch, or I'd see it move. And using that bright colored line actually allowed me to do that. So on my straight tail worm, that's what I do. So let's switch gears to more of a power Wacky Worm situation. So power Wacky rigging is something that I really like to do. My dad is a big proponent to this. He likes to throw the biggest worm that he can, Wacky style, on the biggest hook that he can. So with that, he turns to a little bit larger gear, 15-pound test, Strike King fluorocarbon line, and this big gaff Wacky Rig hook. I always used to make fun of him for it. This is just a Gamakatsu hook. It has like a little terrible weed guard on it, but I don't know why, but it hooks them good. Everything's good with it. You know, and believe it or not, I throw this on my Magnum Hammer, the same rod that I throw a trap, chatterbait, all those things. I throw my Wacky Rig on it. And I'm talking Wacky Rig and stick baits. So like a 5-inch Senko or 5-inch Ocho, 6-inch Ocho, I use the Magnum Hammer. You want a little bit of tip, but some decent backbone, and that's exactly what that hammer gives you. And on Wacky Rig, you want them to let them eat it pretty good, and that's what that does. And that 7.3 actually works perfect for a 6-inch Ocho as well. But this is the hook that I use for the 6-inch Ocho. So basically, I'll show you exactly how I rig that. So, you know, the cool thing about, well, that's the 4-inch. That's not the right one. Is this it? Yeah, here it is. I keep colors fairly basic on my 6-inch Ocho because when I'm throwing it, I'm on a big bass place like a Gunnersville, Toledo, Sim Rayburn, places like that. I don't throw a 6-inch Ocho everywhere. I just don't. Because as you can see, this thing is gigantic. I mean, it's big, fat, heavy. I actually take this big gaff hook and I truly rig it dead in the middle. And I rig it all the way through. And that I give it just like that. So you're going to throw some off. One little hack that will help you not throw as many off is something I learned from Shin Fukai. And you can get these little gambits, okay? And you have to get the tool with it, which, I mean, it just kind of stinks. I bought my own. These little Gambit sleeves will actually slide right over your Ocho or your Senko. They make them for pretty much every size worm. You can even put them on your straight tail worms if you want to. It will increase the longevity of the plastic because you're not tearing through the plastic. You can use this little sleeve, hook your hook in it. It makes it super simple. I always keep a bunch of different sizes with me with that. So in a situation where I maybe only have 1 or 2 packs of a set of plastics, I'll put those on and I'll increase that length of life for that plastic. So that's one thing I do, you know, and that I fish that big one, and that's strictly because my dad is such a big proponent to it. It casts extremely well. You can cast a long ways. You don't need any weight whatsoever with it. It sinks really fast, and so you can cover a lot of water. If you're on a big bass lake and you're looking to get a big bite, that 6-inch Ocho will definitely get it for you. Now, one other way that I like to Wacky Rig, and it's with a 5-inch Ocho, a 5-inch Senko Ocho, whatever. I mean, it's honestly whichever one I pick up first. I don't have a preference. I won Cherokee on an Ocho, but that was with a weighting system, a weighted jig head. But something that's made me a lot of money in the last few years, and I hate that everybody's talked about it, is Neko rigging. Okay, and Neko rigging is a little bit separate than Wacky rigging. Wacky rigging, like I said, is the art of rigging your worm horizontal. Okay, well, in this case, I'm rigging my worm vertical. Okay, so I'm going to show you exactly how I do it. Now, I'm not saying this is a science or this is the exact way that you need to do it. This is just how I do it. So basically, I get my Ocho, which is just a 5-inch green pumpkin Ocho, and you can get these little Wacko tools. You can get them at Tackle Warehouse. I'll drop a link below for you so you can find them. And all it is these little O-ring things. So basically what I do, and this is a little trick, because these O-rings kind of get tight over time. Like you put them in a box and they'll get heavy. So you take your worm, and these Ochos are really slimy, and you just rub it all over that tube, kind of lubes it up a little bit. And then all you do is you run that O-ring all the way to the edge, okay? Just like so. You insert your Ocho, and I always insert it to where I want it. I don't want to have to slide it on the worm, so I always put about a 1/4 of an inch below the egg sac, and I push it over it, and just like so, okay? So basically that's what I do. Now, this is where a lot of people have differences of opinion. Some have been using tungsten weights. I have tungsten, I've used them, and they're great, whatever. But this is a little trick I learned from Brandon Polnick. I think it's who I actually learned it from. But basically, what I use this little VMC Half Moon head. The VMC Half Moon head, I'll have a link below for it as well. But it has a true end to it. So what I do is I'll push this thing about halfway in, like so. And as you can see, there's still a gap there. And that's when I put my super glue, squeeze a little bit of super glue in there, and then push it the rest of the way in. That weight will not fly out. You're going to have to lose the worm before you lose the weight. If you use any other little nail weights, you're going to lose them. I'm just telling you, I've done it too many times. I've thrown too many weights out and not even realize it. That's what's frustrating about Neko rigging, is whenever you're fishing, you make that cast with that worm and that weight's buried up in there, you might fish for 45 minutes without the weight in there and you have not realized it. And that will completely impede you from catching fish because it's not going to have the same drop rate. Things just aren't going to work the same way. So if I have this weight, this VMC Half Moon rigged in the end of this Ocho, I'll know exactly that weight is in there at all times because I'm going to visually be able to see it every cast. And that's a big deal to me. So basically I use the exact same hook that I used with my Wacky Worm, my original Wacky Worm. And it's just an O'Shaughnessy style straight shank worm hook. This is actually a Neko hook that I think Mustad makes. It's a really good hook. I think it's a size 1. VMC also makes a really good one too. And none of these are, like, as far as VMC, Owner, Gamakatsu, none of these guys are sponsors of mine. I just use the hooks. I use a lot of variety on hooks. I believe in a lot of variety. So basically, you want your weight down like so. Here's your O-ring. You take your hook, and I skin hook it. So I push it through the worm a little bit, and then out the other side. So basically, this is how my hook is going to look, just like this. So weight down here, hook, O-ring, tail end of the worm. So there's a couple ways that I like to fish this. So basically, I'll either fish it 2 ways. One way, I fish it on the same spinning rod that I fish my weightless Wacky Worm, my straight tail Wacky Worm on, which is that 6'9" Mach II Rod. I'll fish it on here. And this is when I'm fishing it out in deep water and I'm fishing for smaller fish. And I know it sounds kind of dumb, but when I'm fishing for smaller fish, that means I'm using lighter line. I'm typically using like a 6 to 8 pound leader. I'm fishing for spotted bass, sometimes smallmouth, and I need that little bit of lighter line, lighter hook diameter. So that's the way I fish it. Otherwise, if I'm fishing You know, another little trick is I take a big bullworm, an 8-inch bullworm. Strike King makes it. It's basically like a mag trick worm, if you're familiar with it. And I'll rig it the exact same way as I do this Ocho. I'll actually use a little bit heavier weight, typically a weed guard hook, and that's what I'll fish around brush piles. That 8-inch bullworm fishes extremely well. It stands up, do everything you need to do. But that's when I'll actually switch to casting gear. I'll go to the same Magnum Hammer and actually about 12-pound line. I don't like throwing 15 unless I'm in shallow water. And the reason I throw 15 in shallow water is because, ask my dad, he's broke off so many giant fish on the one time that he switched to 10 and 12. I'm not saying you will break them off, but if you fish Rayburn and Toledo enough and you fish around trees enough, you're going to break off a lot of fish if you're fishing 10 and 12-pound test. So that's just a fact. I mean, you can dispute it and say, oh, I've hooked a million fish around stumps and broke them off. Well, that's great. I'm just telling you, like, I've witnessed it way too many times. You want to upsize your line slightly, not huge, but slightly when you're fishing in that shallow water. You know, guys, thanks again for watching this video. I know it's been a minute since I posted one. I hope this helps you catch fish right now. I know if I was fishing right now, I would have these rigs rigged up, especially that Wacky Rig straight tail worm or that 5-inch Ocho, and I'd be covering a lot of water, having a lot of fun, catching a lot of bass, because right now is the very best time to go bass fishing. You know what? And maybe this is a blessing in disguise, because now we all get to fish the spawn while this virus is just going rampant. So be safe, wash your hands, have fun. Thanks for watching. We'll see you later, guys.